Hey everybody, this is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. The wheels have fallen off this bus and is crashing into the ditch. Omid Scobie is on a damage control tour and it doesn't seem to be working. Omid Scobie went on ITV's This Morning to defend the criticism that he had been receiving this week for the book Endgame. I'm going to go through this interview now and rip it apart because I'm not buying it.
I knew this book would be controversial. It obviously goes into areas that I think that often royal correspondents shy away from, whether it's conversations around race or...
Okay, so let me point this out. From the very beginning, we see Omid using the race card as his excuse. And every time he uses that excuse or talks about the controversy around who was the racist, he looks over to the book, avoiding eye contact with the interviewers.
From whether it's conversations around race or, of course, the relationship between the press and the palace. I think what's been frustrating is seeing so much written about the book that just wasn't true.
I'm seriously at a loss for words at how Scobie could sit there with a straight face and say that.
There were stories about things that I'd supposedly said about the Princess of Wales, Kate, for example, that she only smiles or grins in front of the cameras or something. There's not a word in the book that reflects that whatsoever, and neither have I ever said it in an interview, but there's not a word in the book that reflects.
As you can see here, he's lying and making up excuses. He's looking down, avoiding eye contact. And here is the proof. In the chapter that he created just for Catherine in talking about the Princess of Wales, he builds Catherine up, but then knocks her down at the same time, making it appear as if she is not responsible for what we're seeing right now. It really is the fabrication of an image that the monarchy has built. Now, let's all keep this in mind. Every quote that Omid chose to include in this book was designed to paint a picture of the Princess of Wales being someone who was created by the firm, almost like she had no authority on asserting herself in who she really is in what we're seeing right now. Omid decides to include this quote from Hilary Mantel, in which it states, "It almost seems that appearing this way was Kate's sole purpose for the firm, especially after she birthed an heir. I saw Kate becoming a jointed doll on which certain rags are hung," Mantel wrote, adding that the Duchess appeared like a shop window mannequin, with no personality of her own, entirely defined by what she wore. End quote. Now here is what Omid writes. A harsh observation, to be sure, but also a truth most find hard to swallow. Like Diana, Kate became a sparkling showpiece for the firm. Right? So imagine this guy sitting up on television saying, "Oh no, I didn't say anywhere in my book that all she does is just smile." No, you didn't necessarily do it, but you built it up to a point where when it came down to the story of the scandal and the topless photos being leaked, yeah, you did actually say that because you built this up as if Catherine had no mind or authority of her own, and this was all the doing and what we're seeing as who she is in real life, a result of the machine at the monarchy. He refers to her as this shiny thing, which is so misogynistic. Could you imagine if we called Meghan a shiny thing? They would come after everyone by saying, "Oh, that's dehumanizing." Well, this was dehumanizing to Catherine. Anyhow, as the segment goes on, the interviewer then puts Scobie on the spot.
You sort of have to sit back and watch these things play out. And then
you did refer to her as a Stepford wife, though, which is kind of offensive too, isn't it?
Before you hear Omid's response, let's take a look at what he actually wrote. He writes, "I remember having a similar conversation with Kate at a Kensington Palace media reception after the birth of Princess Charlotte in 2015, one in which she spoke about the challenges of parenting. I look at my friends and think they have it all figured out, while I'm just making it up as I go along," she said with a laugh. "I always thought this more frank, real side of the sometimes Stepford-like royal wife was something that others should see more of." Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Do I believe that Omid heard this from the princess herself? No, I don't. And the reason why is it's his word against hers, and I don't trust his word. And secondly, why would she say something like that after having now a second child. Don't you think she would have some idea on what to do after having George? So it's hardly believable that Princess Catherine would say, "While I'm just making it up as I go along," when talking about Charlotte now. This guy really is not fooling anyone. But here's how he responded and addressed this part of the book.
It said Stepford wife like, and I think that the whole section of the book, if you read it in detail, talks about that she's never put a step wrong, but also that the role does require that kind of stately detachment.
It's fun watching Omid try and backtrack out of this. And yes, it is true. He did compare Catherine to the Queen, but he took not so glowing things about the Queen and applied it to Catherine. So him saying that she never put a step wrong, okay, he said that, but it's not because of her doing, it's because of the palace and the brand that they created and this image that they want the public to see.
But of course, if you compare that to, say, everyday folk, there is a sort of like very reserved, almost Stepford-like approach to the,
it's kind of
the position.
It is a kind of a hard thing to say or to hear about yourself, and you can understand why there's been a lot of negative reaction. A lot of it feels like a bit of a hatchet job against the royal family, okay? And, Harry and Meghan, they kind of are largely untouched from negativity from your pen in this. So, a lot of the speculation is that you are a mouthpiece for Harry and Meghan. So what is your relationship with Harry and Meghan at the moment?
I'm not their friend. I've never sat down with Meghan privately for interviews.
If we want to get technical, yeah, I believe Omid never actually sat down in private with Meghan and said, "Okay, tell me what you want in this book." But we all know that Meghan was feeding information to Jason Knopf. Meghan and Harry used the same route by using a go-between to keep their hands clean.
We know Meghan was in touch with the first book and sent some advice your way.
Well, she wasn't in touch with the first book.
Via an aide.
She spoke to her communications officer, and I discovered that at the same time as the rest of the world.
So it happened.
But
how Scobie can sit there and lie like that is beyond me, but let's call out the bullshit. If you go to the UK public court hearing that was held on November 10, 2021, the lawyer at timestamp 5151 says, "But there is a lot of evidence in the application for fresh evidence about the extent of the cooperation with the book." Then at 5237, he says out loud, "Could we please start with tab 6B? Could you please go first of all to page 74.9? And this is an email to Mr. Knopf from Meghan Markle." She writes in this email, "You know how personally frustrated this is a particular point to tie the narrative. And please note the words used here. Quotes, but given we are being asked to cooperate," and this is the injection of the lawyer, identical word to cooperate with this evidently authoritative biography, continues on, "I need to share I will not be comfortable doing so if this person is an authorities tweeting us below. Can we set up a chat? I feel he needs to be back briefed as soon as possible. If there's any conversation about," and the lawyer indicates, and this is the other word, collaborate, about working with them moving forward. So this 100, 1,000, 1,000,000% is a lie on Scobie's behalf. Meghan wanted to set up a direct chat, and we know conversations were held. So see it there in the court hearings. But if court documents are not fact enough, look at the author's note in Finding Freedom that Scobie wrote. As you can see here, as well as our own time accompanying, observing, and interacting with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex on all of their formal and informal royal engagements. Scroll down below, the charities and organizations they have built long-lasting relationships with, and, when appropriate, the couple themselves.
We know Meghan was in touch with the first book and sent some advice your way.
Well, she wasn't in touch with the first book.
Via an aide.
She never exchanged information with Meghan. I'm not in their private world in any way whatsoever. I discovered that at the same time as the rest of the world.
So it happened.
But
So it happened.
It's the job of a communications officer at the palace to deal with the press.
But if you're not dealing with them, it would be very surprising that any of her staff or aides would talk to you. So people are questioning your sources.
Can I ask you a question? Have you ever had this conversation with people that write source quotes about Camilla, Charles, William,
100%.
Kate? Do they ever get called friends of, mouthpieces of, cheerleaders? Yes. Or is it simply because people don't like the narratives that I purport?
Do you kind of feel that some people are trying to maybe discredit you, discredit the Sussexes to kind of avoid discussing whether or not the royal family's racist? Would you say that's...
How predictable. This woman has said nothing throughout this interview, and the first question she asks is about racism. Your fallback plan? Use racism as the reason. Now, right here in this moment is where I believe now that Harry had been fully involved with this book as well. Listen to what Omid says.
Firstly, I've never used the racist word when in this subject. Even the book makes it very clear that we're talking about unconscious bias here.
Did Meghan ever mention they're racist?
Do you see how arrogant this guy is?
Well, my understanding is, because of my own experience, the difference between racism and unconscious bias, the two things are different.
Don't worry, if you feel like you want to throw your remote against the TV, I was there today.
But once it's been acknowledged or pointed out to you as an individual or as an institution that you have unconscious bias.
So if this really was unconscious bias, why didn't Scobie call it out when he reposted Gayle King's post about the racism in the royal family? Thank God the internet is forever, because Scobie actually deleted this tweet. Now let's talk about one of the bigger moments in this segment where we see Scobie shucking and jiving around the royal racist names being included in the Dutch version of his endgame.
Primarily a name being named in the Dutch version of your book.
Well, two names.
That just seems bizarre to everybody else. There, because you don't accidentally put in a name and you can't put it down to mistranslation, can you? It does feel like a stunt to sell books, which I understand.
I wish it was the case.
Okay, how did that happen?
It's still being investigated right now.
What do you think happened?
I wrote and edited the English version of the book with one publisher.
Let's put this to bed. Is the publisher to blame for this snafu and including Charles and Catherine's name in the Netherlands book? Let's see. Back in 2022, when Scobie announced this book, it specifically stated in the press release, journalist Omid Scobie sold world English rights to a currently untitled book set for 2023 to Carrie Thornton at Day Street. Day Street said Scobie, who co-wrote Finding Freedom, a 2020 biography of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, will focus on a new chapter of the royal story and feature unique insight, deep access, and exclusive revelations. Albert Lee at United Talent Agency, or UTA, brokered the deal on behalf of Scobie. Emma Should Be Writing on Tumblr posted this anonymous submission in which they break it all down on what this means. Emma Should Be Writing explains it beautifully. She starts off by saying, "Well, well, well. Thank you, my darling. Let's have a little Emma publishing lesson, shall we? Disclaimer, this applies only to selling rights for an English book to an English-speaking country. But I often sell my translation rights for my self-pub books, so I'm used to this. Publishers will take one of two options, World English or World Rights. World English is what it says on the tin. English language rights, usually split between US, UK, Commonwealth. With this, you handle foreign translations yourself, although publishers will work together. World rights is the whole shebang, including translations. When it's this, the publisher then shops around for translations, and whatever the foreign publisher pays for it comes off your advance. World English rights means he sold just English and held on to foreign translation rights. Day Street would have then sold the UK/Commonwealth rights to Harlequin, but Scobie's agent would have shopped the translation rights, which means Harlequin did not send the manuscript to Xander. Omid Scobie's agent did, and his agent would have sent the manuscript Omid Scobie provided as a final copy for translation. Nope, this doesn't look good at all. Scobie can't blame the publisher, and it looks like this might fall on the shoulders of the agent. Does anybody think the agent's going to take a fall for this? I don't think so. Oh dear.
That then gets licensed to other publishers.
Yes, meaning by Scobie's agent giving this manuscript, the one that Omid wrote in English, over to the translator.
I obviously can't speak Italian, German, French, Dutch, or any of the other languages that come out. So the only time you hear about the book is once it's come out in the public domain.
So yeah, Scobie's trying to make it look like it was the translator's fault, and they're the dumb ones that couldn't take the English version that he gave them via his agent and translate it, and just so happened to drop two names randomly into the book. Right, Scobie? Keep telling yourself that.
I'm as frustrated as everyone else. I make it very clear in this book that I, in every way possible, want to adhere to the laws surrounding this subject. It's
why I've been very careful in how
it's described in the book, and it's why I've never spoken about it beyond...
Sure, Jan.
And it's why I've never spoken about it beyond
what I've said in the public domain before. The reality is, though, is that this is information that is not privy just to me. Journalists across Fleet Street have known those names for a long time.
Scobie really is a bad liar. He wants us to believe that this information was leaked to others. So what, Meghan and Harry were shopping around with this information? Because we know the king didn't do it. Here's what I don't understand this idiot is doing. Why is he deflecting on other journalists, right? Don't you think one of those journalists would have came out and exposed it in some way because they equally want clicks? Like, none of this makes any kind of sense, or at least the lies that he's coming up with are not doing very well to explain this story is complete bullshit. Meghan gave him this information, whether it be through Marcus, whether it be through Ashley, but she shared it with other people, or possibly even Harry. Even though he said that he would never share that information, we know somehow he is aware that the information was shared and probably sanctioned it and said, okay, do it.
But for me, I can only talk about the English version of the book that I wrote and produced.
But are you upset by it, though? Are you upset by it that those names came out when it had nothing, you didn't want that to happen?
I had never submitted a book that had their names in it, so...
I'm going to speculate what happens here. Scobie gave a version to his agent for the foreign translation that had the names in it. While he may have kept the English version, he definitely gave a copy to his agent to go peddle to the other publishers that had both those names. And it was so sneakily done, and maybe it was even Meghan's idea to do it that way. Oh, the web we weave when we choose to deceive.
I can only talk about my version.
Yeah.
I'm obviously frustrated. I wouldn't say I'm upset about it because, to be honest, I've been operating in a bubble of no emotion for the last 10 days. But I am frustrated about it, just like I am many of the other things that I've seen written or said about the book.
Scobie, you are a terrible liar. You didn't learn anything from your madam. Here's the thing, folks. He indirectly acknowledges and confirms that those were the two names. The interviewer says, well, aren't you frustrated that this happened and the names got out? And he's like, no, I'm not frustrated. He's more concerned about his reputation at this point and being sued. If he didn't put the names in this English version, right? How would anybody know what names to put? That's one. Number two is that he didn't denounce and say, no, those weren't the royals, or, those were not mentioned. I'm not aware that they are confirmed. He doesn't say anything at all to dispel that. And that's telling, because right there, by not saying anything, you're actually confirming that, yes, this was leaked by accident, not my fault, but hey, we'll try and get down to the bottom of it. But yeah, the names that I only knew about were put in there. And now he's blaming and saying that there were other journalists that knew about these names. Nah, I call bullshit. Now, isn't it something that Meghan and Harry and their PR machine have been quite silent this week? Not only have they not spoken out against this book, which is telling, But also, with all this distraction of endgame, they know exactly what they did. So I bet Megan is sitting there trying to figure out how is she going to kick Omid Scobie to the curb and pretend that she doesn't know him. I wonder if Marcus now has left the country and gone elsewhere so people can't find him. I will bet you Scobie right now is going to be fed to the wolves and thrown under the bus, because you can bet Meghan and Harry are not going to take the fall for this. Scobie is about to learn what it feels like to be Markled. Not only is Meghan going to throw Scobie under the bus, she's going to drive over him, then back up on him, and then drive over him again. You can bet. I don't know how Scobie and Megsy are going to get out of this one. The publisher is pushing back and saying that they were given the correct copy to translate. You know what I see is going to happen here? I think Megsy's going to force Harry to take the fall for this one. I do believe Megsy will not fess up to being the one who is responsible for this, even though we know that she is. She's going to put Harry to take the fall. This is just my gut feeling on it.
Firstly, I want to say Harry and Meghan don't appear in this book until page 146.
That's not true, but who's counting? They appear in the prologue, so before we even get into the first chapter, he talks about Harry and Meghan.
I say very early on, they are irrelevant to the future of the royal family.
Oh boy, Megsy's not going to like hearing that one. There was one moment I had a soft spot for Scobie, but it lasted for a quick second. This was it.
Death threats are almost like the least of my worry. Yeah. I had tabloid journalists harassing my father last week and the week before, trying to purport all sorts of nonsense.
You can see that he's really upset about it because his father is innocent in all of this. Even though Scobie has contributed to other people being harassed and stalked and put in danger, I still think that regardless of who you are, it's just not right. So in this case, yeah, it's justified for him being upset that his family members are being targeted. But at the same time, he should have thought about his actions because, part of those actions, did contribute to people feeling anger. I don't condone when people go after everybody in a person's family to get back at them or to shame them or to ostracize them. I don't think that that's productive, but I also think that Scobie needs to have some type of accountability for what's happening to his father. The result of this behavior is from the culture that Scobie is very much a part of in cultivating and gaslighting the public. He needs to understand that he's part of the problem. What concerns me, though, is we know that Meghan's going to leave Scobie high and dry. I'm concerned that Scobie doesn't have the stomach to withstand all the criticism that he's now getting and the potential for being sued. Look, it's obvious. Omid really cares about how he looks as well as he cares about what people are saying and what people think about him. I think we can all agree that the last couple days have not been fun for Scobie. In a time where if you're publishing a book, you would think it would be something to celebrate. It doesn't seem like he's doing any of that. After watching this segment, I did feel slightly sorry for him, not because of all the criticism that he's facing. I feel sorry that he got involved with this narcissist because we all know that Meghan doesn't give a shit about Omid, and she will hang him out to dry if push comes to shove. I know we've said a lot about Omid, but one thing is for sure, he definitely wants to please people. And if he was writing this book and Meghan was involved, you can be sure that his goal was to make sure that this book pleased her. Hence why we saw all of this craziness going out.
I've had things done that have happened behind the scenes that no one would ever know about.
I think this could be a wake-up call for Omid, but yet to be seen. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because, he's put his neck out there and he is learning quickly that there is nobody there to save him. Possibly thought maybe Meghan might speak out. Crickets. I think that in itself is the wake-up call. Let's just all hope that he has taken the last couple days to reflect on why there is such a big backlash against this book. And also, if the criticism and the backlash has been a lot to a point where he just doesn't want to be here tomorrow, Here's what I say to you, Scobie. Please go and talk to someone about that, because it does appear you seem to be unraveling a little bit in this interview. So here's my closing thought. And it's not only on the interview, but also on the book. Overall, this book was nothing new. Everything that Scobie had told in it had been already featured in a tabloid or an autobiography. He literally took everything and put his own spin and twist onto it that was favorable to Meghan and Harry. So, yeah, there's stories in there. It's not a complete book of lies. It's just spinning the narrative and painting a different picture in efforts, once again, to reshape history. What's interesting is, and this is the final note, in the book itself, he writes that Kate was free from scandal. Of course, listing her as one of the racists now does blemish her record to some extent. And I believe that Meghan wanted to do that. Now, sadly, this is going to be a stain on Catherine's record, unfortunately, because there are people who are against the monarchy and will choose to push that narrative because whether or not they believe it, it is damaging to the brand and reputation. It will be interesting to see if the monarchy takes action and does file a lawsuit. I'm thinking they might, but what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below, and you know it, as always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
It was such a fraud.